Okay, hi. My name is Amanda Sheard, and I'm really, really excited today to have the wonderful Louise Evans. I've got hopefully about an hour of her time, which is fantastic. Louise Evans, for those who don't know, is the creator of an incredible program and a model called the 5 Chairs, 5 Choices, which is all around behaviour, communication, how we show up. It's a fantastic model for any individual, for a community, for an organisation. It's terrific, and probably no time like the present to actually talk about it. I've been very lucky to study under Louise Evans in her wonderful home of Italy. And Italy has been, as you know, at the absolute epicentre of the crisis. So Louise has some amazing insights to share with us. So I just wanted to start off by introducing Louise. And she's got many, many years of working with corporates in terms of training and education, development, coaching, to the point where she's developed this exceptional model, which I think can help all of us. And I'd just like to ask her a little bit about what she's seeing at the moment and how the chairs, generally speaking, are relating and helping others to what we're seeing right now. So over to you, Louise.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And you know, as you're speaking, I'm very sad because I was supposed to be coming out to Australia in August, and I don't know if that's going to happen. What do you think?
Oh, it could be premature. I mean, they're talking about the borders not opening for quite some time and keeping travel fairly insular. But, you know, maybe fingers crossed. Yeah, it would be wonderful.
Fingers crossed. Anyway, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you, and also to talk about the 5 chairs, because I realize myself as we go through these sort of unprecedented times that interpreting what we're going through through the sort of eyes of the 5 chairs is opportune in a way. It's just my phone. I'm going to turn that off right now. There you go. And for anybody who doesn't know the 5 chairs, you know, as you know, when we do this in the training room, when we're live, we have 5 real chairs. But when I went on lockdown and we started thinking, now what are we going to do? We've got to take the 5 chairs online to do webinars. The question was, wait a minute, how do you get 5 chairs on the screen? So because we were on lockdown, it wasn't as though we could go out and buy things, substitutes. But you know, look what I found.
Beautiful.
Aren't they amazing? I found them in the bottom of a drawer. And in fact, they were chairs with only 3 colors. So I managed to paint the other ones. So yeah, they're sweet.
They are gorgeous.
Yeah, and I thought for anybody who doesn't know the concept of the 5 chairs, it would be quite interesting maybe to talk through them through the lens of maybe leadership, because you mentioned you'd like to talk about leadership, yes. Moving through COVID, basically, because we're seeing so many different sort of approaches in the world. And also, don't you find it fascinating how different countries are behaving in different ways, with different political systems and different leadership approaches?
Very much so. You can really recognize it in the chairs, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what is surprising me so much is how sometimes we just don't listen to one another. I mean, we have best practices which are being built in parts of the world, and other parts of the world are not even listening or exploring them and say, no, we know our way is the best way, etc. So that worries me a little bit about collaboration in general worldwide, you know, a little bit like in organizations. Sometimes departments don't listen to each other, or even in a worldwide organization, in one factory, you might have a best practice which never gets to the other side of the world and implemented because people are just not communicating or not listening. They're in sort of tunnel vision. And I think it's very, very obvious what is happening, the lack of collaboration well, I mean, there could be an awful lot more collaboration, I think, across borders. But this one here, now I'm going to test you because you know the chairs. This is the red chair. What's the name of this one?
The jackal.
Yeah, okay. So just to explain, the chairs basically represent different styles of behavior and communication that you can bring into the world when you're triggered by something. Why triggered? Because when we're triggered, usually we bring out the worst in ourselves. And I think if we look at the trigger in this conversation together as COVID, it's interesting to watch reactions. Now, from this chair, it's red. It's the animal is the jackal, because each chair has an animal metaphor. It has a name, it has a color, and it also has a quote which goes with it, and an object as well. And in this, so what's the name of this chair?
Sorry, the red chair, the jackal?
Yeah, the name of the chair.
Attack.
Yeah, brava. Fantastic. So look what I found here. These are finger puppets. So this is the attack chair, and I think, you know, looking around the world, if we're looking at this type of leadership, what we're looking at really is leadership which is not listening, leadership which is saying I'm right and you're wrong, leadership which is bullying, leadership which, I mean, I think a lot of it is about that. There's been a lot of discussions about where do you put your attention? Do you put your attention on people and their health, or on the economy? And I think, you know, leadership which has really been concentrating purely on the economy tends to be sort of jackal behavior. I mean, the thing is that I think a lot of leaders feel really in great difficulty because these are unprecedented times. We're sort of working with in uncharted territories, and I don't know, but I get the impression that pandemics or epidemics are usually act as a mirror to us human beings, basically, and they sort of expose the darker side and the more heroic side of us human beings, and they expose the relationship that we have between mortality, obviously, and also to our environment, but the environment which we have created. And right now it is just magical. If you think of how much we've been abusing nature, yeah, magical to look out of the window and see no smoke lines in the sky, and see the incredible pictures from New Delhi, where people are seeing blue sky for the first time for years, as the world is unpolluting. You know, there's no transport, there's no traffic, and we're breathing clean air. It didn't take long for nature sort of to clean itself up, but we created that mess, you know. So it's like, it's putting up a mirror to say, hey guys, what are you doing? We put the world on a pause button, and this is what is happening. And also, you know, the moral relationships that we have towards one another. It's like asking the big questions right now. What are we doing to our world? And my fear is that maybe we won't listen hard enough. And so, you know, there's this sort of leadership which is happening in the world, in certain countries, and in particular one country where there is quite a lot of misinformation, a lot of untruths coming out, a lot of manipulation of information,
Blame.
which is blame. I think the blame game. And we're seeing it happening now between, and this is very worrying, between America and China, you know, and where's that going to lead? Because I think often when sometimes leaders in this chair, when they're in trouble, they turn to the blame game, because I mean, it's normal, I think, for leaders to find themselves in trouble with so much fear and confusion and disruption going on. But it's, I think, what you do with that, and I really do believe that the true colors of a leader come out in a time of crisis. And so the way you behave in these times is what your people will build or unbuild the trust that you have in your people. And so, you know, in a country like America, we see a president that is having extraordinary behaviors. I mean, he's in real trouble. And then you see somebody like the mayor of New York, who is doing an extraordinary job of leadership, who's constantly in touch with his city. He's constantly communicating, but he's also having the courage to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
that level of vulnerability, which is courage to say, hey guys, I don't know, but being incredibly empathetic as well, you know, getting that extraordinary combination, which I think, which is so important in leadership right now, which is the mixture of maybe being decisive, but also patient, and being honest, and being empathetic. And I think, you know, there are certain leadership models in the world which are lacking empathy a lot. And this is where we're seeing the impact of this type of leadership. And people get afraid, and it's like leading by fear just doesn't work. It breaks down trust.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that in certain countries around the world. We're seeing that playing out with all the consequences.
And it's almost triggering other countries to be the same, combative, not cooperative.
I'm afraid so. And I think it looks as though we could be heading towards a confrontation between China and, I mean, people are talking, analysts are talking about it already, that we're ready, probably coming up to another Cold War period where there'll be a confrontation maybe between America and China, because it's a struggle. I mean, this again is the politicization of the virus, because there was already a big debate going on about who is really leading the world, because China is becoming so powerful and of course has designs to become the superpower. So it's probably a moment the virus is going to be used maybe for as almost an excuse to play out the world power and find a new find a new world order.
Yes. However, we're also seeing quite a bit of cooperation. So, for example, all the medical teams and pharmacy and, you know, pharma companies are starting to come together for something globally. So that's, you know, positive.
Yes, and that's the heroic side. You know, they talk about the darker side and the more heroic side. And I think the way people are, I think, you know, the thing about human beings is one thing we have that animals don't have is imagination. And imagination about the future, and it can take us down two tracks. If we're not careful, and also this is very important for leadership, we tend to launch ourselves into the future, but in a negative way of catastrophizing. Or we can try and remain more realistic about the future. And I think this is another thing which is very important for leaders to hold in mind, and it's not easy, is what can I control and what can't I control? And it's a bit like Stoicism, I mean, the roots of Stoicism. Let's put our energy on what we can control right now and not waste the psychological energy on something we can't control, and certainly not catastrophize and blame and go into the negative psychological sphere, which is going to again increase people's fear. So really, really challenging times for leaders, you know, and I feel deeply for anybody who has a powerful leadership role right now. Yeah. So that's the one. That's the attack chair, and we tend to have that's why it's red. You know, behaviors which tend to be blame and shame and not taking responsibility. Or this one here. Can you remember the name of this?
Yes, that's self-doubt.
Yes.
Yes. So that's the hedgehog and yellow. Yeah.
Right. It's nearly right. It's the hedgehog. Exactly. So I mean, the hedgehog, because you know, the hedgehog tends to curl in front of any provocation, will curl up and defend itself and feels extremely vulnerable.
I think so many people will feel that they've been in the red and yellow chairs during this time. What am I going to do? Who do I blame? It's fairly natural, isn't it, to be in these spaces?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm
watching. The more
watching.
pressure you have on you as a leader, the more likely it is you're sitting there.
Of course. And all of us. And I mean, I see a lot of blame going on right now in Italy towards the government. The government's trying to do its best.
Okay, right, yes.
People are scared, people are worried, people don't know what the future looks like for them. So with that confusion and that level of disruption, then it's about attacking, you know. So, and I think the thing is that, you know, with the model is we all go in and out of these chairs, every individual. It's more about how can we manage that best for ourselves, and as leaders, best for our people and ourselves. And I think here, what we're seeing leadership here in this chair here is about the sense of feeling lost, feeling pretty insecure, and loneliness. At the top is who is helping me. There are no models really to really help you with a pandemic of this size.
It's uncharted, yeah, absolutely.
And also paralyzed by fear. I mean, there's also a lot of, I think there's a lot of panic execution as well, you know, doing too much or actually doing not enough, is being paralyzed and not communicating enough. It's interesting, I've been speaking to employees about their leaders and saying, what is the top request that you have of your leaders right now? Very interesting answers. First one is trust.
Yeah.
Please trust that I will do my work when I can. Give me the flexibility to do it not between 9 and 5, because I can't say to my 3-year-old, hey, honey, I'm working between 9 to 5, so don't bother me.
Yeah.
You know, kids don't work like that.
No.
And obviously, you know, if you're a leader without children, it's about how much of an imagination do you have in order to put yourself into the shoes of people in very diverse situations to your own. You know, that's a big challenge too.
Yeah.
So it's like the loneliness at the top. And the other thing people are saying is, so flexibility, trust. Please trust us that we will work. And obviously, this is a test of what any leader has done in the past. Because if a leader has managed to build the trust in their teams, etc., it's going to be easier moving into this phase of lockdown. But if people have been managing by micromanagement and command and control, I mean, I have seen examples of leadership right now from one extreme to the other. One is the articles around how can you best control your people when they're at home, you know, all sorts of, you know, instruments to get behind the screen and to check, you know, and get people to leave their screen on all day just to check that they are physically there. And it's like horror stuff. To the other extreme, where I wanted to read something to you of what I thought was amazing leadership. It was a CEO who wrote something to his whole organization as they went into isolation. And this is the message that he sent. He said, you are not working from home. You are at home trying to work. Your personal, physical, and emotional health is extremely important. Please take care of yourselves first. You should not try to compensate for productivity by working long hours. Be kind to yourself and to others. Don't judge others or yourself. Success will not be judged in this period in the same way. So, I mean, can you imagine if you were an employee and you received that message from your CEO?
Oh, you would give so much loyalty and you would be so relieved. And you would get a flow, yeah.
I think that's right. It's about character and humanity, isn't it? I mean, first, it's that delicate balance of where do we put our emphasis?
Yeah.
On the economy, on the financial, on the human, on the health. You know, it's an amazing, to strike the balance, I think, is an extraordinary challenge for leaders right now.
And I think that actually relieves that self-doubt that you're talking about. You know, will I have a job? Am I cared for? Is my job meaningful? Am I producing what the company wants? Will I go? You know, if you hear that message, it's incredibly powerful, isn't it? If you're in the hedgehog chair, for example.
And this is it. And I think, again, it's the leader's ability to put themselves in the shoes of every employee and say, what does it feel like to be at home with 3 kids and, you know, and a wife who's not, or a husband who's not working and having very little salary. I mean, what is coming out now is some extraordinary figures in the first world of how much poverty there is in the first world capitalist context, which I think is, you know, can be quite shocking, really. So these are the big chairs to be managed right now, not especially in yourself, but also managing it in other people as well as a leader. It's about how can I absorb other people's fear and make them feel safe, whilst when I myself am riddled with questions and uncertainty and
that was one of the questions actually I had for you, Louise, is that how do leaders manage during this time when they themselves are as anxious, or if not more anxious, than their direct reports and their colleagues and their own board, for example? How do you
yeah
that?
Well, that's a great question. And the other thing that employees, which I think helps leaders too, the other thing employees were asking for was communication. They were saying, we're working well between our teams, but we're not hearing from top management.
Right.
We don't know what's going on. And I think that whole rule of constant communication, even if it's saying, guys, I don't know.
Yes.
Because this is unprecedented, it's just being ever present, being engaged and being empathetic. And, it's making people feel safe. And if you don't communicate, people will read whatever story they want in the silence.
Fill in the gaps with all sorts of misinformation. Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God. And if you think about that, I think one of the responsibilities we have as individuals today is, where are we getting our information from? Because if we're getting it from Facebook or social media, it's completely unfiltered. And there's a lot of stuff out there which is very dangerous and fake. And, taking us into these chairs here. So I think that social media diet and our responsibility of choosing what to share with people, with our families, with our teams, with etc., is so important. Because if we're not checking on the information and checking on the sources and sharing certain information, that reflects back on us and our credibility. So really, really careful times now. What do I want to share with people? But this thing of being in touch so that people feel safe, even if it's we don't know. I mean, hey, the whole world is in this situation for the first time historically. So, it is an opportunity. But I think sometimes, leadership does think, oh my God, I don't know what to say because I don't know what to do, and we haven't got a plan yet. And it's difficult to say that to people. It is amazing how sometimes people, particularly in a situation like that, are just happy to hear that you're working on it, and you're trying everything. That there's a dichotomy, it's like, how do you hold two truths together at the same time? Like, what is the worst case scenario that could happen to us as an organization, and look at that. But then and fighting the fires and everything. But then also, what are the opportunities moving forward into the future? Now, if leadership teams can actually hold the two together, then the actual second part of which is looking into the future and what are the opportunities is really a way of keeping the team buoyant, or at least because there are opportunities here. But if you put your attention more on, the tragedy of the situation, then it's going to impact everybody psychologically. So, I mean, I think it's such a massive test of leadership, of relationships, of everything in our world right now. How resilient are you?
Yes.
How much do you bounce back? I mean, keep going. How affirmative can you be in your messages to your people? What do you learn? I mean, I just think we're going to be learning so much about ourselves with these sort of waves of criticism as well. Leaders being criticized, governments being criticized. I think it's a chance for real growth, real self-reflection, and real growth.
Yes.
So that's talking a lot about this area here, the massive challenges right now. Yeah. This one here, moving on with the model. Tell us about that one.
It's the meerkat.
It's the meerkat.
Who keeps lookout and can keep lookout, is ever vigilant.
It's ever
the green chair,
yes.
and it's about pausing. What am
Right,
I
about
thinking?
pausing. Right. And so the name of the chair is?
The weight chair.
Yes. Da-da-da. Okay, so I think massively important, this whole thing of, not doing panic execution, but stepping back, observing, listening, learning from one another, talking to each other, is you, one worry I have is that, um, as we came out of normal living and we're talking about going back into the new normal, I wonder what that looks like, and I wonder how capable we are of creating a really effective new normal. This is all about, let's stop and really think about this, because up until the lockdown, if you looked at the way we were living, it was manic. I mean, if I speak to my father who's 98, he had time for private thought in his workplace. Here, nowadays, we not only are we highly digitalized, we're just bombarded by information. How much time do we really have to sit down and do strategy?
Mm-hmm.
People are working 4 times harder than my father was, for example. And my fear is that we're just not going to take the time to really think about change and then really implement it. Apart from the fact that we might not have the governments necessary to make that happen. This is the chair, however, of let's stop, get off the train for a moment and think about, in our organizations, there are bound to be massive changes, like, the health. I hope that the health industry is going to become one of the most important governmental industries across the world, because we have seen, I mean, I look at the States and I look at my own culture, in England, where the health system has been heavily privatized, and look at the impact. Devastating, which is not, for me, unacceptable in the first world country. Health system, etc. And a lot of people will probably never go back to work. They will stay in this context, virtual context, which is actually, if you spend time creating an effective and inclusive virtual platform, which I think is going to take time to do it well, people can work well. But the first things that seemed to happen was people were working harder than ever, and they were getting stuck to their computers and weren't taking breaks. And I've been watching companies saying, okay, enough is enough. You're going to go on burnout. All of us are going to go on burnout. You have to have a break of 15 minutes during the morning. You have to have a whole hour for lunch, a break in the afternoon. You have to do some exercise, find time for your children, find time for your family. So this again is let's be realistic about what we're asking people to do. Let's reset. Let's see what we need to do. How do we need to change our approach to customers? Customer behavior is changing so much. Consumers are now so much more used to buying virtually. Even simple things like I work with retail organizations. People love to go into shops and touch things. Yeah. What does that look like now? What does it look like now with, when you want to try glasses on, for example? There are all sorts of things which you're going to have to reinvent to make the customer orientation service a completely different experience. So this is I think here all about stop, sit back. What do we have to do? How do we change? What are our options? And potentially it's a chair of high levels of curiosity and also creativity.
Yeah, I spoke to a very senior leader a while ago, and he was pretty much sitting in that chair, and for the first time talking globally to all of his leaders about what are we going to do. So being extremely vulnerable and opening it up as a dialogue now, probably for the first time, because they've been very successful, to innovate. So this is really a chair where you can sit and think and innovate and become much more creative, or start that process, I think.
Absolutely beautiful. And I've seen that here too, is leaders saying, if we're talking about stores, let's talk to our store managers. We give them the project. They know better than we do, so this is an opportunity to really be creative. So, potentially a wonderful chair, but if you don't sit there and but you need courage to sit and wait a bit. rather than panic and go straight into sort of,
Yeah. Yeah.
panic execution.
Yeah.
So beautiful chair, wonderful chair. And it's also calming because it's something that I find really interesting and have been doing with some leadership teams is doing some question storming. And the exercise is the team sits down together and all they do is ask questions. Because, leaders are there usually to fix things and provide answers. But the freedom to ask questions, and the more teams do it, the deeper the questions become and the more vulnerable the questions become, like things like, are we going to make it? Will we be able to come out the other side? What will I look like on the other side? The very powerful things, but it's almost like a sense of relief that I can get those big issues out in the world and I don't have to answer them. So it's almost as though as you get them out through questions, you actually release the tension in you because the team gets to a high level of vulnerability. And then you can look at those questions later, but it's the freedom of saying, I haven't got all of the answers. Let's ask some questions.
And they have to be very psychologically safe to be able to do that. Right?
Oh my God, I think
psychological create that right safety. Environment.
Yes. And I think that's, creating the psychological safety for people too is massive right now. Really, really important. And that leads on to this one here. So the blue chair, which is called...
It's blue, it's the dolphin, and it's detect.
Yeah, you're great. There you go. So this is the dolphin. Why is it a dolphin?
Because the dolphin can recognize itself. It is incredibly intelligent and emotionally aware.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a fantastic
that's it.
feature.
Exactly. It recognizes, it's got self-reflection, recognizes itself in the mirror. So this is, well, I think this chair in leadership is all about your level of resilience, how much you know yourself, because again, as we said before, this is a great time to get to know yourself. What are your limitations? What are your strengths?
We have the opportunity now, really, don't we? With the time that people have and with the,
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Deep questions. It's about, how much your emotions are controlling you or you are controlling your emotions. It's about your level of adaptability, your agility, your ability to create strong collaboration in this time where, this type of communication is separating us in many ways. Is how do we make sure it doesn't? It creates, another type of collaboration. Clear communication and clear action, so important in this chair. It's clarity, because we're seeing so much confusion right now. People, especially with governments sending mixed messages, people get extremely anxious. And of course, the more stressed out you get, more likelihood is that you're going to get the virus because your immune system is going to be broken down by stress. And this is the other thing, is burnout. We have to be so careful that people are not burning out at home, having to manage things, 24/7 with husbands, wives, siblings, children, grandparents. I mean, this is full on in a limited space. I mean, mental health, people are not really talking enough about mental health, or even they're beginning to talk about mental health now.
We're finding that now,
But it is such an important thing to address, is the whole psychological journey that people are going on here. So here, very important, to a certain extent, staying ahead of the game as much as possible. But it means, really spending time reading and updating yourself on a continual basis whilst also doing your job. So it's a lot. So the dolphin is the sort of assertive leadership. It's the guiding leadership. It's going back to that, taking decisions and being decisive. And even though people are pushing back, like it's happening in Italy right now, the government is, people is up in arms and saying, of course, they want to get back to work. But the fear is if we go back too fast, too quickly, then we're going to have another wave again, which is going to have an even worse effect on the economy anyway. So let's be careful and prudent, So, you know,
Mm.
and so that's the dolphin chair, the assertive guiding leadership. And the last one, which is probably the most challenging right now. Which one is this?
This is the giraffe, and this is empathy.
Yes. What's it called, the chair?
Oh, you've got me. Isn't it empathy?
Well, it's that is the absolute fundamental skill in order to do the connecting.
Connect.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Well, no, you've got empathy implanted in your mind
It's
because
implanted
it is
in my mind.
so incredibly important right now.
Mm.
And you know, it's all about the intention that you have of where do you place your attention.
Mm.
And you know what is really interesting is they have people have been studying leadership styles in the world recently, and what has come up in quite a lot of articles that I've been reading, like with McKinsey and Harvard and all Harvard Business Review, and everything, is that female leaders are being massively praised for their leadership in the COVID situation. I mean, top of the list is Jacinda Ardern, no, in New Zealand. I mean, she was incredible. She went into level 4 lockdown, and I think that this in March, and I think the figures. I mean, okay, there's only 5 million people there, but of 5 million people, there were like only 1,400 cases and 11 deaths, which is extraordinary. And the other examples were Taiwan, an extraordinary example of leadership. Taiwan, yeah, female leadership, but Tsai Ing-wen, I hope I didn't pronounce that properly anyway. But, you know, Taiwan, who was actually it's a sort of an arch enemy of China, was not part of the World Health Organization, found themselves on their own. And after SARS, said, we're going to get ready for this. And so as it appeared, she took the country into, again, full on this mixture of being very decisive, but also seeking for expert advice. And so we look at Taiwan, we look at Germany, we look at Norway, Finland, Iceland. These are the main countries that have had great successes with female leaders. The question is, what were they doing that was so effective? And what came out of the analysis is there is a tendership in female, a tendency in female leadership to be quite humble, in the sense that when they're in a crisis, they will seek their humility allows them to seek the expert advice from an external input, and use external input rather than ignore expert advice. I think empathy is part of female makeup anyway. It's like elevating other people, creating teams, building teams, and communicating communities. But I think it was this combination of seeking expert advice, humility, but also driving, knowing people first. It was like people first. We have to save our people before we can open an economy. Because if we have sick people, we can't open an economy, or the economy is not going to work. So concentration on
what do we put first? Yes,
I think that's it.
People.
It's people first. It's and perceiving the risks in that way, and then acting quickly on them. And this is what has come through. And I thought it was very, very interesting to.
I think what you're saying there is a little bit of a combination between the detect and the connect, isn't it? So it's the blue and the purple, very much in evidence. Yeah.
It's like saying, okay, what do I need to do here? I need to speak to the experts, because the most important thing is people. Yeah. We have to get people safe, and we have to get them cured. Otherwise, we have no economy, basically. But then I'm going to speak to my people in an empathetic way, put myself in their shoes, and understand what they're going through. And then I'm going to take decisive decision as fast as possible in order to protect what I have learned from the experts. But a lot of it is about the human factor of the humanitarian crisis, making people feel safe. And so I think it's interesting to have observed that in this particular, and maybe a lot less politicization of the virus as well.
Yes.
Maybe
yeah, something we have to deal with. It's not, no blame. So we're not down in the jackal, are we? Or in the self-doubt. We're going to take action. We've got the information. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it was showing I am full of self-doubt, but you know what, I'm going to talk to the experts in this particular case, which is the medical world. And so
that's a very interesting example, Louise. When we're feeling, whoever we are, whether we're Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand or the Taiwanese Prime Minister, whose name I forget too, I'm afraid, if we're in that yellow chair, is it almost like we just step out of the fear and do it anyway? I mean, how does that happen? We're in the red, we're in the yellow, we're realising that's not getting us anywhere. Do we step into the green and then go, right, I've got the information? You know, what's the catalyst for that type of behaviour?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because when we hear the questions are, Jesus, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
God, this is really tough.
Yeah.
But then it's about, you need a lot of self-empathy. And you have to remind yourself that these are unprecedented times. And from what the leaders have been doing is they have been talking to each other. The problem is if you don't pick up the phone and start talking to people and feel that you have to solve everything by yourself.
So it's that vulnerability, which is also part of the hedgehog, really, isn't it? You know,
and if we go back to if we go back to Brené Brown, you know, and all her research on it's about having the courage to say, hey guys, I don't know, and be okay with that. And I think this is a problem in leadership, is that there is a fear to say, I don't know, because there's this sense of being over responsible, is we can't know everything. And people will forgive us, especially if they trust us, when we say, I don't know, because you say it in a certain way, like, it's not, oh my God, I don't know, and you don't communicate. It's more, it's more about, this is really tough, and we are working and talk. I mean, if you say to your people, we're meeting, we're talking, we're looking at all the options, we're still in a phase of exploration, etc., etc. It's a bit like the vaccine, you know. As long as you keep people informed, people have something to work on. Silence is killing. Yeah, and it creates a lot of anxiety.
So this is with being a leader and dealing with COVID-19, essentially. However, the chairs can be useful for every level, can't they? In terms of how we're showing up at home, given what's going on. How are we behaving with our children and our families? Are we snappy? Are we blaming? Are we doubtful? You know, it's it's, and not just now, but even when things are normal, relatively normal.
Exactly. It is a tool fundamentally for self-exploration and self-regulation. You know, and of course we're going to snap. I mean, I've been in lockdown with my husband now for 2 months. You know,
when you say that, it sounds like a prison sentence. I'm sure it's not. I've been in lockdown with my husband, but you know, we're all in lockdown with our families, and it's a heavy word, isn't it?
It's about how are you coping as an individual? Yeah. How are you treating your husband? How are you treating yourself? Are you having the necessary conversations to make sure that this is looked after and kept at bay as much as possible? You know, it is very challenging, and I think, you know, if you look at the change curve, we watch the whole world go through the change curve from sort of denial and then into anger, and then into sort of a honeymoon period where people were quite getting used to it and good at the game, and then into the phase of, I can't do this anymore, I've had it. You know, that's where Italy is at the moment, you know, and the tensions within families is really increasing a lot. And I think that's another reason why people just want to get out, you know. And then it's about, how do we discipline ourselves as we do go out into the world, and how, again, the empathy. Something very interesting happened in Italy is that the church says that people want to go back and worship as soon as possible.
Yeah, okay.
And of course, this is very problematic because we're talking about large gatherings. And, you know, what the medical community said. They said to the church, because the medical community is still saying it's too early, we have to be very, very careful.
Yeah.
They're saying to the church, right, so you make sure that you look after the people that go down with the virus. You do, and it's like saying, hey, wake up call. Have we forgotten about what the medical world is going through for us? And there's a high level of egoism sometime around, are we thinking about the consequences? Because people in the health system are just up to here, and how many sacrifices have they already had to make? How many, I mean, my family is full of doctors. 6 of them have already had the virus and they've come out the other side, but they're back in the hospital working.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, there has been some fantastic obviously some fantastic support for the medical world, but let's not forget what they're doing for us every day.
And I think a lot of the people that I speak to are working in corporate, talking about working from home, and the stresses are bad, but when you think about frontline, it's a whole other dimension. We can't forget that.
It's a whole other dimension, and we don't see half of it on television. I mean, the level of exhaustion that even suicides are happening now, is that when you see that many deaths, and when you see trucks full of bodies that are being carted away because, and you have to come down to, you know, when you get to the peak is deciding who must and who can and who can't live. I mean, horrifying. It's sort of like the war zone, but it's concentrated in the hospital areas, etc.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's very, very tough.
So, look, I've got a few questions and I've actually written them down. So a few people have asked some questions. Are you ready for those? Or did you want to talk a little bit more about the chairs and leadership?
No. You go ahead. You absolutely go ahead.
Okay. All right. I was going to ask you, but I think you might have answered this already. Are you seeing more collaborative or competitive behaviour in the community and in organisations? And how's that playing out?
You know what? I think it all depends on the leadership. I mean, I think the leaders that have set up their organizations around trust, and where there has been quite a high level of attention given to psychological safety and security, and where people are valued, seen and valued and listened to, this is much easier for them. I think in other situations, whether it's countries or organizations where the leadership has tended to be based more on control, maybe command, control, you pay the price now. So I think what leadership has happened before is now exaggerated, in the sense of the limelight is on it. I think it's really quite difficult to create trust in this situation, because you really have to allow people to do what they can. But if you're going in with, you know, these terrible sort of techniques of checking up on people at home, then it's I think those are the organizations which are going to fail. It's an opportunity, however, to build trust.
The other question that's come up is how can we move people into the right chairs? So when we're seeing this, what is it that we can do as individuals when we're seeing people too much in the red or the yellow for too long? What can we do for our culture?
I think I love the question, because I think the first thing is we can't move people into other chairs. They have to decide to go themselves. What we can do is, and I think here again, gosh, it's really hard, because if people are in these chairs here, the first thing we need to do is have empathy, because we all go into the jackal chair, we all go into the self-doubt chair. Is how do we empathize for somebody who is here? Because if we don't empathize, then we're going to, you know, we're either going to be attacking them, or we're going to leave them, or we're going to shut down, and then anyway we've disconnected. So this is why I think the most important chair of the whole, or the most challenging chair, not the most important, is whatever happens, wherever we are, especially these two, how good are we at understanding our fellow humans because they are in a moment of deep trouble, or because they have no idea what to do and are completely lost. So I think it's about saying, it can either be about even having conversations like, I can see you're really upset. What's going on?
Great. Okay.
You know, you put a mirror up to them and allow people to see how they are so that they can actually help themselves. And I think here it's about building people's confidence, because often when we're here, it's because we've been told in the past we're no good, we're not good enough. So, you know, it maybe helps to be seen and trusted and supported a little bit more, valued a little bit more. But I think we can influence people, but we can't change their behaviors. People it's a little bit about human evolution, isn't it? Is where are you? If I want to look at myself and if I listen to the voice in my head and I think, I don't like that voice, it's not productive, and it creates in me behaviors which are negative, not only for me, for the people around me, because look at the people, they don't come and talk to me. This is not good. I need to change. Something I am doing is creating disconnection. So that's my responsibility. If people don't take the first step of saying, I am responsible for all my behaviors, you can't make me do anything. What I can do is always decide, and that is, as what Viktor Frankl says, yeah, this is the last of human freedoms, is to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. Yeah. And that is my power. But you're not responsible for that. I am.
No.
So until we say, okay, everything I bring into the world is my responsibility, it's tricky. And there are people who will not take responsibility because they will constantly blame the world. And no matter how much you put a mirror up and say, look, you know, it's not about you, the rest of the world, it's about you, what you decide to do with your own life. That is the power that you have. It's difficult to shift people. Some people will stay here all their lives, and other people will wake up maybe around the age of 18 or at the age of 30 or age of 50, you know, depending on how life pans out for all of us. But it's the self-awareness, I think, which can help people shift. But I think you have to be able to show, like, we're never taught this stuff at school. I mean, why aren't we taught at school to be productive citizens, in the sense of, you know, to be assertive, to speak our truth and not be afraid to speak our truth, to be empathetic, to try and put ourselves in other people's shoes, you know, to step back and think about things before attacking. I mean, I'm sure that if we were taught this when we were young, it would become our sort of daily muscle. A sort of a DNA, you know, kids get this really very, very quickly, and you can, as soon as they know the model, they'll start giving feedback to their parents. Saying, Mum, you're being a jackal, you know, or Dad, you're in the self-doubt chair, aren't you, right now? Things like that, you know.
Yes. They'll catch us out, the young ones, for sure. But the place to start, presumably, is empathy and curiosity, which is, you know...
Yes, curiosity.
The green and the empathetic chair.
Yeah, because the curiosity, if you're curious, you stop judging.
Yeah. The other one was, what daily, weekly routines can we adopt to become more resilient as leaders and individuals? What are the sorts of things we can do? Probably more to sit in the green chair.
Yeah, I think resilience, if you look at it, it's about rebounding. And I think building resilience is also very closely related about managing stress. And it's about looking at the type of life that you're leading. You know, how are you managing your day-to-day life? How stressed out are you? Because you can't be resilient if you're up to here in adrenaline and cortisol. So the first thing really is to make sure that you're leading a life which is sustainable at a psychological, physical, and mental level. And then it's about, you know, what are the things that I can do to be more resilient. And I think so much of this resilience is about not doing it alone. It is about communicating. It's about talking. It's about having the strength to talk about how you're feeling and what you need, what is important for you, and sharing that with people, because that's where resolution comes in, and that's where solutions come forth, and that's where they begin to build. Because you're not concentrated on me, 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 me. The more you're talking to other people, it's more about us, 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 and what other things, new things can we create?
Yes.
And empathy for me is probably one of the most important things for building resilience, because if you are concentrating more on other people, on your teams, etc., etc., you tend to come out of this, self-imposed bubble, psychological bubble, and you're in the world contributing, and that has a completely different energy. So
yeah,
I think it's a combination of things.
Yeah, brilliant. And it seems that things like perspective taking and experimentation are very, very important right now in leadership, more than ever. And the pace of change, the VUCA world, they're really core skills. How would that relate to the chairs, do you think?
Yeah, I love it. Massive here. This is it. I mean, I think this is where leadership teams or people in general will sit down and say, okay, questions, what's going on, what are our options, let's do some sort of paradoxical thinking, let's look at worst case scenario, let's look at best case scenario, let's look at the future. And I think the more you get the brain actively and positively sharing all options, the whole psychological state of people opens up to possibility rather than and optimism rather than to pessimism. So, and I think it's about, these are the facts, this is reality, let's not catastrophize. Let's not use the imagined future in negative terms, but in practical terms. But our brain loves going into catastrophe.
Yes, yes.
And this is where I think leaders need to very, very much need to help their people to build the muscle of looking, staying in the present moment. I think is extremely important right now, because in the present moment there's very little suffering, because we're not building stories about the future which are not true yet. Like in the past, we do the same sort of regrets and everything. Keeping people in the present moment, I think, is not easy, but it's certainly more effective.
Fantastic. Okay. And in terms of the 5 chairs and how it relates to other models, how does it relate to things like emotional intelligence or growth mindset? How would you describe those in terms of relative?
Well, I think it's to be quite honest, it's a mixture of everything, because excuse me, certainly a lot of this is about how do I make sure that I am managing my emotions and they're not managing me. A lot of it is about social intelligence too, which is about how am I leading and guiding, and what do people need. I mean, if you look at the big intelligences, if you're looking at emotional intelligence, social intelligence, cultural intelligence, massive for cultural intelligence. I mean, as people are going into lockdown and they're having to virtually communicate with teams the other side of the world,
Absolutely.
hello, we're going to get really different styles of communication, of managing, of taking decisions. All the cross-cultural diversity is going to come to a fore, and if it's not managed, we already know how badly we manage emails. Some cultures that are more direct, like maybe the Swiss, the Germans, the Northern Europeans have a much more direct style of communication, which when it hits maybe the Southeast Asian cultures where the approach is more indirect, more careful, etc. It's not one style is better or not. It's about the impact. They are preferences. So we have to be very intelligent about how we are reading emails as they come from a very different style of communication, not go into blaming, And I see that happening between German and Italian teams. They have a very different approach. When they get together and talk about it and understand each other, they are, in fact, some of the best teams I've ever come across, because they complete each other.
Yes.
You know, from the high level of flexibility in the Italian culture to the incredible level of analysis and discipline, you put that together in a trusting situation, you get a great team, because you get people who can manage crises well, and you get people who can plan within the crisis. It's work, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's having the wisdom to be able to bring that together, isn't it?
Yeah, and also the openness.
Yeah.
And the learning to say, I want to learn. And this still puzzles me, why so often in organizations we don't learn from each other across the world, but we keep reinventing the wheel.
And in terms of what's sort of out there at the moment, people are talking a lot now about digital leadership. So what would it be to be a really great digital leader? I mean, based on, you know, we're just talking about the cross-cultural and the fact that so much is virtual. What does a good digital leader look like?
So I think this is the most important challenge right now as we move forward, because the world is beginning to become more and more digitalized. The digital world is creating a lot of reactions from this chair. I think it really is fundamentally about having an incredible level of imagination to understand how it feels to be in this situation. Even very simple things like, you know, I've noticed that people are not really prepared in their virtual, haven't built a strong virtual culture yet. Even very simple things. I see leadership teams who are talking, but they're not showing their faces on screen.
Right.
And I ask myself, well, why not? I mean, what is the difference between this meeting and a normal meeting? I mean, in a normal meeting, for example, would you go into a meeting in a meeting room and do this?
No.
And hide yourself.
Yeah.
So what is that all? What is that about? Why isn't your name up there? Why don't you have a picture? Why don't you get up front? What are you hiding? And I mean, I know there's a whole lot of psychological stuff at a practical level that people are afraid of cameras, they don't like it. But leaders have to take the front role here. I mean, there are so many issues, because now that I'm doing webinars, something like Zoom, at a practical level, Zoom is excellent for inclusiveness. Because you can see everybody. Skype for Business isn't. Teams isn't. You don't see everybody. So I think even simple things like, what do you, okay, Zoom is problematic at the moment for security reasons, but what are the tools that we're going to be using to make sure that we can recreate as much as possible a sense of togetherness, of warmth? You know, people are forgetting about the informal communication that takes place in organizations, which is incredibly important for building trust, and also for
all that walking down the corridor, having a cup of coffee. You can't just be on task the whole time, can you? And digital keeps you on task, but you need a lot of the rest in terms of relationship building. Yeah.
That's the human factor. And it's about, you know, how, as we move forward, and this is here to stay, let's sit down and think seriously about what netiquette we want to bring into the organization. You know, I mean, you look all over the net. There's netiquette. But wait a minute, what is netiquette for us in our organization? How do we want to behave? What messages are we going to send to everybody at home about what our expectations are, bearing in mind, you know, people's situations at home? Just now, for example, in Italy, schools are not opening up until September, but mothers are expected to go back to work. Hello? How do you manage that with kids at home who are 2 and 3? No. Then level of empathy is, we understand you, we get that, we're going to help you, we're going to find a way. But the level of diversity that has to be managed now, because everybody's at home, is challenging. But it's a great opportunity too.
Yeah. Terrific.
If it's thought about carefully, though, I mean, it's like, what will our virtual culture look like? Let's sit down and think about that, and make some behavioral requests of people, so that people can work productively and not burn out.
Excellent. I think we're just about out of time. You've been so generous with your time, Louise.
It's been lovely talking to you, really.
Yeah,
has.
you too. So I'm just so delighted. I think the chairs are more important than ever for all of us to contemplate and work with. And I'm really looking forward to doing more work with the chairs in the future. And hopefully you can get here in August.
I will. Sooner or later,
Mm,
definitely.
yeah.
And I can't wait to see you and everybody. And I really wish the very best of luck for you all there. And my heart goes out to you. You went through such a tough time with the fires and the drought and everything. And now you've got the virus. I mean, it's not fair.
I think we were just getting over that when this happened. So Australia's had a very interesting 2020 so far.
Wow.
And we're getting through. But, you know, it's relative. We haven't had the loss, the loss of life that you've had over there. And heart goes out, really. And, you know, it's a global world. There's plenty of Italian Australians here, and there's plenty of people around the world that are caught not able to see each other's families as well. So we're all experiencing grief and hopefully reinvention in different ways. Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Let's hope that when we come out, good things come.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I want to say thank you, and you know, best of luck to everybody there, and all of you keep safe.
Thank you. Thanks, Louise. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao, ciao, ciao.